forehead down to that forehead.
How did you
One was during some soccer.
Now about 1:30, so we'll start the seminar. Thank you very much for joining us today. Today the topic is here, trending benefit and pension. I joined for the couple for the presentation organized by the Toronto Regional Board of Trade. And that for the seminar event for this purpose, today for our firm, they are specialists. They made a very good presentation for the plan. So I asked them to have the seminar today without any previous connection. Just call and send an email to them to give us opportunity to have the seminar here. And then accepted or then happened that this seminar today. You may know that Congress is work with Toronto Regional Board of Trade to have the compensation survey every year. They are the kind of specialists in this area. So we are expecting today some of useful information or special advice or information regarding for this kind of area. Today the 90 minutes until 3 o'clock we are here. I hope you to have lots of information you want today. Okay. Chris.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Ito. So thank you very much for having us here today. We're quite excited to talk to you about some of our favorite topics, which of course are group benefits, group pensions, and thank you to Mr. Yoshito for helping organize this. He told us a little bit about the kinds of things that you might be looking for today, and what we're really here to do today is give you a bit of a good sense of where benefits and pension plans are today in 2006 in Canada, or 2016. 2006 we could do too, but 2016 is far more interesting. And we're going to give you a bit of a sense of where things are headed as well. So some ideas about where we believe trends are headed. But we've summarized it in really what we think are the top 5 major trends that we're seeing in the industry. We're going to pull up some industry data as well. And we're also going to be showing you some information that's being pulled from the Toronto Region Board of Trade benchmark survey that Mr. Ito had mentioned. So we'll be drawing a little bit on that, and I have some data towards the end of the presentation that I'll share with you on that as well. So my name is Chris Lee, and I'm VP of Communications at Compass, and I'm joined here by Mr. Dimitri Polyak, who's a consultant in our investment and retirement practice, and Patrick Hill over there is a consultant in our benefits and health practice. And we're also joined by one of our colleagues, Chris Bromley, who's a consultant in benefits and health. So he's the friendliest guy at Compass, so you'll get a chance to meet him towards the end as well.
Where's that leave us?
Yeah. So they're tied for second. And this is really meant to be informal, so if you have any questions along the way, just feel free to jump in and ask questions. You can raise your hand or you can just jump in, but we'll try to address them as we go along as well. So I'll jump right in. I mean, one of the things, when we talk with a lot of our clients, the first thing that we generally like to talk about is the strategic imperative for your group benefits and your pension plan. So a lot of employers have different reasons for why you have a benefit plan, but this is a really important starting point, because if you look at plan design changes, or you're thinking about coming up with something new or something that you've seen somebody else in your industry do, it's important to really understand why you have a benefit plan in the first place, or a pension plan. And if we go back on the data, Sanofi Canada, a couple of years ago, they asked this very question to employers. And I'm going to focus a little bit on group benefits, but the question was, why do you offer benefit plans? And so what they found was about 1 in 4 of them answered, well, you know what? It's a cost of doing business. And we're offering benefit plans because everyone else in the industry is offering benefit plans. We don't want to be that one company, that weird company that doesn't have benefit plans. Because of course, what does that mean? It means that you might not be able to recruit the top talents available for the role that you're looking at. So that was about 1 in 4 companies said it's just a cost of doing business and we need it to be competitive. Another 31% said that they do it because it's actually part of the total compensation package, right? So this is something that is a perk, it's a reward. We do it just because it's just another part of the compensation. And then on top of this, about 2 in 5 companies said that we offer it because we believe that if our employees are healthy, they're going to be more productive. So it's not that there's huge differences between these responses, but you can see that 2 in 5 is a pretty significant number of employers that really do want a healthier workplace. And you think about what that means if you have a healthier workplace and more productive employees. So you'll have less absenteeism, you'll have lower claims on a number of different items. And Patrick's going to be mentioning and talking to a lot of these points. But and the other issue that comes up too, which we'll touch on a little bit later, is an issue of presenteeism. So presenteeism just simply being that you have some employees that are there in the office or in the factory, but they're not necessarily as productive as they can be. So that's kind of where we want to start off things, is asking yourself why. So when it comes time to make a decision about managing your costs, this actually will help you strategically figure out what some of the options are that are a little bit better aligned with your organizational strategies. So I'm going to pass it on to Patrick to talk a little bit more about what trends we're seeing in benefits, and then he'll pass it on to Dimitri, and he'll talk about, of course, you guys saw that last week was an interesting piece of news. So not just Britain exiting the EU, but also at the federal level, they talked a little bit about the Canada Pension Plan. So Dimitri's going to walk through that with you guys. I'm sure there's a lot of questions about the developments there, and also the fate of the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan.
Yes, no, I've already heard that a lot of people here are really interested in this, so I hope I don't bore you too much with my part of the presentation until we get to Dimitri, but excuse me. So wellness, building off of what Chris talked about, wellness is one of those components that can really help with employees being more productive, or employees feeling more appreciated. So what are companies doing in the way of wellness? One of the things we're looking at, or one of the things we do talk about with our clients more and more these days, is that wellness component. So this is part of the Sanofi survey that Chris was talking about. So large companies, so companies say over 500 employees, they were surveyed, and are they providing some level of wellness program to their employees? So 63 people at a company, or 63% of the companies said yes, we are doing something in the way of wellness. And with that said, the employees of those companies are also surveyed, and when a program is implemented, and to those employees, about 66% are making use of it. Either 100% full in, they're enjoying taking part, or even some one at a time they're taking part in it. So again, this is becoming a trend in the industry with HR representatives, and not only designing a wellness program, but one that engages employees to again get some of that outcome of retention among the workforce and getting more productivity out of them. Part of the survey also looked at what do employees want in the way of wellness. Sorry if I get too much in here, I'm moving around all over the place sometimes. Flexible work came up. So that again, another trend that companies, not all industries can go this route, but some industries can afford to go this route in the way of flexible work. So in Canada, having 2 working parents is becoming more the norm. It has been the norm for a while now. So if employee, and so both these parents possibly have commutes on top of that. They're busy lives. If an element of flexible work can be added to their, into their offering or into their standard, into the standard of the workplace, that's going to be well appreciated, says the survey. Flexible work could come in the forms of either working from home on a part-time basis or all the time, maybe flexible hours. So starting a little bit later, working later, starting earlier, ending earlier. So a number of different ways that this can kind of come into play for the organization. As you see here, it's not just limited to that. Employees responded with a number of different items or initiatives that would be appreciated. Everything from healthy foods and snacks at the company, company provided in the kitchen, to gym at work, to health challenges at work. Again, this can come in many different forms, and some of you probably already have some already implemented. It's quite possible that these are already common, you're familiar with it. These types of programs don't have to cost you money. See number 3 on the list, gym or fitness discounts. That could be as simple as a phone call to a local gym saying we'd like to offer, promote your gym to our employees. Can you give us a discount? It could be as simple as that. You could go down to companies with employee assistance programs. You already have an employee assistance program, leveraging what you already have. Employee assistance programs can set you up with lunch and learns. It's a wealth of information already online. They send you, potentially send you monthly updates. That is, if you design that or take that information and put it into, repackage it to your employees and educate them, that can all be useful information and kind of take that form of wellness as part of your wellness initiative. Other things, talk about leveraging what you already have, your insurance carriers. Insurance carriers on their plan member websites have a wealth of information for employees. Making use of that, there could be health risk assessments built into those websites. And an employee taking a health risk assessment will educate them to what the risk factors might be, and again, give them a better overall perspective of what their wellness is and what maybe they can do to improve their wellness. If the company is promoting that on a more aggregate, more overall basis, they can, taking that to the next level of using the HRAs, they can get report backs on where their whole organization is sitting from a wellness perspective, what areas maybe they need to focus on in the way of wellness. So anyway, just some ideas there. Again, definitely a trend that we're seeing.
I mentioned too, just the flexible work hours. I mean, that's the top thing that employees are saying that sort of they're interested in and what they want. And it's really reflective of the changing dynamic in North America, where there's unprecedented numbers of women in the workplace, and so when you have dual income households, that has more increasing demands on people's time, so they've got children to take care of, and that's really where, at Compass, we've been seeing a lot of these trends happening is in terms of, different hours or working arrangements where you work at home or different arrangements like that. Technology's also obviously played a big role in enabling that.
Yeah, technology can bridge that gap. So again, it really depends on the industry and what an employer can afford to offer, but again, from the needs of an employee and being able, the needs are out there. If an employer can match those needs or help with those needs, again, it is appreciated. And going back to why you offer the program, it would be an appreciation from the employee. Why does health and wellness matter? Rising costs. Everyone knows about rising costs. And from a business perspective, businesses are used to seeing rising costs or inflation at these levels. So CPI, 1.6, maybe healthcare inflation at 1.2. We did a compensation survey last fall. So again, we got about 400 responses back. This is what we presented at the Toronto Board of Trade. We got 400 responses back, and the average salary increase that employers were providing to their employees for 2016 is 2.75. So that's that part of the business increasing that much. This is what businesses are used to seeing. And from a benefit consultant perspective, we're going in to talk to our clients about these trend factors, these inflation factors. You've probably seen them all at your claim update meetings or your renewal meetings. So this is from the insurer's book of business. For dental care, 5.4%. So that's what they're seeing on their book of business with regards to claims costs, increasing 5.4% on dental. But the big ones we want to focus on today are more the drugs and the health trend factor. 11.7, 11.6, so again, over 11%. So we're coming in to talk to clients about that type of trend factor. Just it's rising so much more than what we're seeing in other parts of the business. And so again, definitely a trend we wanted to make you aware of. Now, this is what the insurers are saying. This is not necessarily what's happening within each of your individual businesses. So again, you'll see on your claims updates, your claims will not be rising that much. If your trend, you might have group-specific or business-specific trend lower than that, maybe half that on the health side. It could be more depending on the wellness of your group. This kind of transitions us, the wellness of your group, transitions into our second trend, chronic illness. Okay, so this is from Stats Canada. The top 6 chronic illnesses: obesity, high blood pressure, arthritis, asthma, mental illness, and diabetes. So this is in millions of Canadian adults. So you might see these conditions within your own population. So if you're doing drug analysis or looking at your drug results, you might see drug claims and supply or things related to obesity or high blood pressure as part of your group-specific claim. So you might be familiar with this. This type of information that you get from claims updates and things like that can help, again, kind of reconnecting it with wellness, can help you design your programs. Okay? And if we were just to kind of target obesity as one example of a chronic illness and how that trend has changed over time. Back in 1979, the percentage of Canadian adults living with obesity was only at 13%. Now we're at 26%. That's like 1 in 4 Canadian adults. That's kind of an example there. That has grown, considerably. And again, something to be aware of. This is probably, again, you have people within your working population that deal with obesity. And just one quick note, which we'll come back to, or we're going to get to, these numbers, again, there's probably going to be some overlap, people with more than one condition. And we're going to comment on it in a second, but just in case people were adding up all these numbers. We're going to get to that. And so obesity, what is the impact? This is the overlap I was talking about. So this pie chart showing, from 18% with no chronic illnesses, 31% with one chronic illness, 32% with 2 to 3, and then 19 with +4. So basically 51%, about half that pie chart, half the population has over 50, has over 2 chronic illnesses. So there is overlap and people dealing with more than one. Example of that, say a diabetic patient, diabetes. Could have high cholesterol as well. High blood pressure and kidney issues. So there's the number of different chronic conditions within a diabetic patient could amount to 4. And you're going to see that. You could potentially see that in your claims results. Another example, cancer patient. Dealing with breast cancer, needing pain medication or ongoing pain treatment, constipation, depression. So again, a lot of different things that can kind of tie into one chronic illness, kind of seeing a trend towards more than one. And that's, again, going towards your 19 and your 32, again, over half that likely to have more than one chronic condition. And if we were to look at just this 19%, so individuals with 4 or more chronic conditions. Focusing on that, or going back to the diabetic patient, excuse me, the impact to the business. So increased absenteeism, so possibly more doctor's appointments, treatments, you know, just again, generally being away from work. Again, more increased sick days than the average person. Chris mentioned before, presenteeism. So they might be struggling, they might be, you know, having that tough exterior, getting into work, pushing through it, but are they there 100%? Not necessarily. You might see an increase in disability claims. So again, you're kind of taking it to the next level, and you're seeing it in your disability claims reporting. More paramedical claiming. So this is paramedicals, so your physio, chiropractor, acupuncture. You might see some more of those alternative treatment claims within your claimant reports. And of course, prescription drugs. This is really a big impact on the prescription drugs when you have, again, more chronic illnesses bundled up. And so this is what I was getting to before. That 19% could account for 53% of the total drug spend.
And this
From
data
those
is coming
19%.
from the Express Scripts Canada just recently. They do an annual report as well, and so a lot of this data is coming from Express Scripts, which is a pharmacy network.
So getting back to the Sanofi, you know, what's important to employees? The survey showed, sounded like a game show there. The prescription drugs, 94%, it's very or somewhat important. So it's ranked at the top of the list of what is important to employees. So, and the employees taking the survey, these are people with, you know, going back to the other slide, you know, could have no chronic conditions, but they also have one to 4 plus, right? So, you know, a lot of people in the survey likely have a chronic condition. They're aware of what their drug costs are. They're showing appreciation for that coverage being offered. And again, aware that there is an importance there to it. Some other points to make, LTD and short-term disability, kind of around that 80% level of what's important. Again, if there's people in that survey that have one or more chronic conditions, they might have used the disability benefit at some point, or been off work for some period of time where they had to investigate, what if I'm off so many days? Okay, what happens then? They're a little more aware of that than a person maybe with no chronic illness. This brings us to our third trend. So kind of wrapping it up to the prescription drugs. And you know, the big thing with the prescription drugs, this was the big thing with this one was, I should remember the big thing, right? is that back into the 11% health trend. This is what's, you know, significantly driving, okay? And, you know, within that prescription drug segment, something we call specialty drugs, okay? Specialty drugs, you may have heard the term biologics. So these are more complex type drugs than a typical traditional drug with more chemistry. The biologic is derived from a more complex process from like living organisms, cells. So again, more R&D, more costly, tougher for the pharma companies to develop, and again, more costly. Back in 2010, 18% of the drug spend was derived from specialty medications. Where are we today? 2015, that has increased to 30% of drug spend. So you're seeing that trend. Out of that 30%, or out of the number of claims submitted, about 2% of just the number of drugs submitted are derived from the specialty drugs. So 2% of claims are causing 30% of paid claims. So quite significant. That is a significant trend that has occurred. That's, again, 2010 to 2015. Where do we see that going? It's going up. There are more drugs, more specialty drugs in the pipeline right now that are, again, being developed and, you know, expecting costs to further increase from a drug spend perspective. Again, it could amount to about 42% in another 5 years. So again, just want to give you a perspective of, you know, cost of a specialty drug and some examples of this and the impact. Okay, so Solaris. So this treats a rare blood disorder. The cost for this medication per year, $700,000. Now again, the incidence of this disease that it treats is not that high. It's very low, maybe 90 to 100 patients in Canada.
Actually, I have just a story on Solaris. So my sister, back in 2011, she was 26 at that time. She went to the doctor and she had just a rash. Like she called me. She said, "I have a rash. What should I do?" And I said, "Well, let's go see a skin specialist." I didn't think it was anything really all that important. And so she went to the doctor and they said, it's nothing really that important. It's just a rash. And eventually she had some issues with her eyesight. So then she went to another specialist and they tested her and they said, "Well, we don't think it's anything to worry about." And she was really worried about this, and it kept on getting progressively worse. And eventually, she ended up down at St. Mike's, and she was legendary at St. Mike's. There was a lot of different specialists that come through to see her to find out what she had. And at that time, it got so bad, she had acute renal failure. She was on plasma exchange. She had a number of different complications that were related to what she had, and it ended up being an extraordinarily rare blood disorder. It's called AHUS, or atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome. And so at the time, they had to prescribe some kind of a drug because the plasma exchange and the dialysis that she was undergoing wasn't going to be enough, and they were actually worried that she was going to lose her life. So that's when they talked to me. I was at the hospital about Solaris. And my father, right around that same time, my sister had stabilized and she was back home. So my father went to Korea to go for a wedding. So one of his cousins was getting married, so he went to Korea. And back home, Amanda had these complications, so she went to the hospital. And that's when the doctor said, "Well, we need to give her this drug." And at that time, the drug had not yet been approved by Health Canada. So it was approved in the US by the FDA. And usually what happens in Canada is, if the FDA approves it in the US, usually it comes in line later on down the road, like usually about a year or so later, that Health Canada will also then approve it. And so what does that mean when Health Canada hasn't approved it? It means it's not covered by the drug plans. It's not covered by the insurance carrier. So the doctor told us, it said, "Well, we think she's going to need an injection of Solaris once a week, every week for 4 weeks, and then every other week for 8 weeks, and then once a month after that." And so we said, "Well, how much is an injection?" And it says $25,000. And so you can imagine, for my father and I, so I had him on the phone because he was staying at my grandmother's house, and I had to call my father. So at this time in Korea, it would have been about 2 in the morning in Seoul. So I called my grandmother's house and I said, and so the phone started ringing, and I was hoping my grandma wasn't going to answer the phone. I said, "Please don't pick it up, Grandma. Let my dad pick it up." But then it was my grandma. She picked up the phone, and I said, "Oh, hi, Grandma. How are you?" And she said, "Oh, everything's fine. Is everything okay? Is Amanda okay?" And I said, "Oh yeah, she's fine. Can I talk to my father?" And so she put me into to talk to my father. And so he actually was in Korea for, I think, about 3 hours, and then he hopped on another 14-hour flight to come back. But he gave the go-ahead to pay for this one injection, and then we had to sort of figure out what had to happen after that. So this really underscores the idea that the importance of a good drug plan. And I think today, Patrick and Chris can attest to this, we're seeing some employers are starting to think about implementing dramatic cost measures such as a drug cap and capping the amount of claims. And again, if you go back to your philosophy, it doesn't really fit in with any of those reasons for having a drug plan, because the reality is some employees do need this medication. So just to cut that story, St. Mike's very generously paid for that initial injection of Soliris. And then since then, my sister hasn't had to have any injections since then. And that was about 4 or 5 years ago. And she's been fine since. But you know, it was definitely a reason for my father and I to kind of think about the importance of these drug plans. But I was jumping with that.
No. I've heard the story before, and I'm always glad to hear your sister's doing.
She's doing great.
Yes, no, again, this is on the high side. I know I saw some people taken aback. This is on the high side. It's not treating a large number within Canada. But this is another specialty drug that you may have heard, Remicade. So treating rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, a number of different conditions. So a number of indications that it could go to. Price tag could be around $25,000. Okay, so a lower cost, still a significant cost at $25,000, but a higher incidence. So you might see 1, maybe 2 popping up on your plan if your group is 300 plus or something like that. It's not an uncommon drug in today's day and age. Pavoni. This is a relatively recent specialty drug that you may have heard about, treating hepatitis C. So again, hepatitis C in the past, there were some treatments, but not necessarily any cures. This has come about 2014, and the cure rate is quite significant, but also at a cost. So this type of medication could range from $60 to $150, depending on, that's $1,000, to depending on how many weeks of treatment one might need. So again, once people are cured, you may not need this as much, but we talked about more drugs in the pipeline. There could be another Harmony drug in the works to kind of replace that one, or fill that, be that next one to impact company drug plans in the future. Okay. Repatha. So another recent one that specialty drug that treats cholesterol kind of came into play last fall. So historically or traditionally, cholesterol is treated with lower costing drugs, either more of the traditional type drugs, which are a lot less costly. This can range from maybe around $8,000 for the year. But if we start getting into cholesterol for these specialty drugs, that, again, more impact to company plans. And we talked about what controls or what things may be to consider, or what are being considered in the marketplace. What trends to kind of deal with high cost medications. That kind of brings us to drug choices and prior authorization. So we talked about, so you've heard of prior authorization. Repatha is a drug that will go on to prior authorization. Some carriers actually have said, because of the cost effectiveness, we already have cost effective cholesterol medications, we're not going to put it on our plan or on our formula. You've probably heard that term before too. So I think you may see some things from, depending on the carrier, start carving out some of these specialty drugs from their offering. Something to be aware about if you are shopping your plans or taking your plans to the market. A trend may be with some carriers, they're not going to provide that truly open formulary in the marketplace. But prior authorization has been in place for a while, and kind of to double check for specialty medications that it's being prescribed for the right things, being used in the right circumstances, maybe trying lower costing treatments first before you get to that initial prescription from your doctor. So it's again a way to keep costs at maybe a lower level, and just doing more or less a double check. brand versus generic. This is not new. Generics could be 70 to 80% cheaper than a brand name drug. So the trend here is, do companies want to provide brand name drugs, no questions asked? The trend is no, not anymore. Companies are putting mandatory generic plans, brand names being allowed for medically necessary situations. Okay, so again, not putting employees at harm, but providing another hoop to jump through before the high-cost medications get covered. Biologic drugs, so we just talked about a few of them, versus SEBs, subsequent entry biologics. These are kind of like the generic versions of biologics. Now, they're not termed generic because biologics can technically have a generic because of the way they're processed. But there are SEBs being produced. There are some already on the marketplace. Insurance carriers are discussing and looking at how they're going to kind of push or look to get SEBs prescribed or employees directed towards those before the more traditional biologics, again, to save money, just to reduce costs and impact to a company's plan. So you'll start hearing more about those. Again, some already are on the marketplace, but processes and things like that are still being developed. Genetic screening. So this is just, the discussions around genetic screening are, how much, an example is mental health. Trying different medications for a mental health condition before finally settling on the right one. A genetic screening could look at somebody's response to certain medications before they're even prescribed, kind of align that optimal medication right off the bat. So you reduce the impact of time off work or that chronic type level and getting the right medication to the employee quicker and more effectively. So again, trials and studies are being done right now on the effectiveness and even the cost effectiveness of rolling this out. Again, still very preliminary, but that's one of the trends in the marketplace right now as it pertains to drugs. Pharmacy choices. You've probably heard of preferred pharmacy networks. This can be from either the carrier, who's come up with partnerships, consulting firms. So at Compass, we've developed our own partnerships to extend to our clients, or even simply you, the employer, going out to the pharmacy down the street and trying to negotiate something for your employees. We've seen all of these in the marketplace. And what this can do for you is get savings both on dispensing fees and ingredient markups. So you just quickly, drug claim, 2 components, dispensing fee, the cost that the pharmacist charges per prescription, typically $4 to $12, could be more, but that's what they'll charge per prescription. And then there's the ingredient cost, which includes a markup. Preferred arrangements could lower that markup. And if you're talking about 500 employees in your group, 1,000 employees in your group, that can be a substantial dollar amount. Quickly, 90-day dispensing fees. If you have a plan that encourages 3-month supplies versus 30 days, so going back to chronic illnesses, people have had their illness for a while now. They can get drugs dispensed on a 90-day basis versus 30 days. This can save the program money. It could save the employees some money too. Greater adherence measures. So again, a program kind of targeting that, maybe reduce waste. And you'll hear that in the marketplace today, is carriers improving that adherence to reduce the drug waste in the marketplace. Okay. So those are the 3 trends, and again, just kind of connecting the dots. Good wellness program can help reduce chronic illness. There is that impact there, and reduced costs can improve the drug claims and the bottom line to your the bottom line of your benefit costs. Again, remember that benefit cost is can be quite high for an in an organization. Again, these types of things, you can reduce chronic illness or improve that through a number of different ways or initiatives that you might implement. Drugs could benefit. So I think I've run over a little bit. Sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. My background is actuarial, and I spent some time beginning my career working with defined benefit plans. And what I've learned with defined benefit plans at the time is that there was a slowing rate, at the time at least, plans being introduced to market. And when I say at the time, this was within the last 10+ years. But for a much longer period of time, defined benefits plans have been slowly moving towards the extinction level of their lifetime. So when we talk about this shift to DC and defined benefit pension plans, or pension plans in general, I think it always helps to set the stage for this. And any retirement plan generally has its lifetime over 2 phases: the accumulation phase and the decumulation phase. And the accumulation phase really takes place over the working years of an individual's life, or a plan's life. That is, the person's working, their contributions, in addition to investment returns, make up assets that are built up in a retirement program, no matter what type of program that really is. There's a buildup of cash. Eventually, that transitioned to the decumulation years, or the retirement years, where that cash, that pile of cash, has to be converted into some sort of income, a pension, some sort of monthly income that will flow through to sustain your living. So, if we're talking about defined benefit plans, how do they fit? Who bears the risk in defined benefit plans, and how does that really fit into this scheme? Well, in the accumulation phase, the employer pays for the contributions, usually entirely themselves, and is responsible for making investment decisions. Really, they bear the entirety of the risk in the accumulation phase. In the decumulation phase, they're still making the same decisions, but now they're also responsible in fulfilling the promise they had made, the defined benefit they promised to their employees, in paying that retirement income out of their employees. So again, really, they're bearing the entirety of the risk. So employers faced with this conundrum have to decide, is there a better way to offer a benefit to our employees? Again, whether it's to appreciate our employees for competitiveness, for whatever reason we decide we need to have a retirement program, is there a better way where we have less financial risk? And remember, this risk isn't a short-term risk. With individuals and Canadians living longer and longer, this risk stays on the books, on the financial books of a company for decades upon decades. Last year, the mortality tables in Canada, the actual standard for mortality tables was changed from the US tables to Canadian tables. It had an effect of increasing costs by approximately 4% alone. Just a change in assumptions of how long people are living. And this will continue to go up. There's no going back in that particular trend. So looking at defined benefits, and in some cases, the situation got so bad that defined benefit liabilities, their costs that employers were beholden to, ran up to approximately 40% of total payroll. Now, when you compare that to a benefits program, it typically runs up to maybe 5%, maybe a little more. We saw the trends that Patrick was referring to. The comparison to almost a worst-case scenario, when almost half of your payroll is now has an additional expense of defined benefit costs, you can see the conundrum employers are faced with. Enter defined contribution plans. And what's the difference? Well, in defined contribution plans in the accumulation phase, the employees share the cost with the employers. That is, there's a plan formula, 5%, 10% of payroll, whatever that payroll is, say base salary. And employees put in their 5%, and let's say employers, as an example, put in their 5%, and they share that cost. That's where the employer's financial obligation ends to a large extent. Employees have now the responsibility to manage their own investments. Whereas employers have to do that with a defined benefit scheme, now employees are left alone to manage that responsibility. When it comes to the retirement years of decumulation, the employees, again, also have a pile of cash at their disposal, but whereas under a defined benefit plan, employers guarantee them a payout, a monthly income, all employees have left when they're ready to retire is just a pile of money. they have to then themselves turn that pile of money into some sort of income. And most of the time, most people, if you ask them, how do you turn $100 into $1 per month for the rest of your life? They don't know. It's not a simple process, and there's a lot of information that people have to absorb to get through that. Ultimately, employees bear the majority of the risk when it comes to defined contribution plans. So when we're looking at the shift from DB to DC, it's not a surprise that there's been this shift of risk from employers to employees over time. A significant reduction in costs for the employers with the sharing of responsibilities. And I know everybody here is looking forward to touch on the CDP section of today's discussion. But as you'll see, we're going to try to build a picture for you as to how we got to the CDP expansion. Why do we need it? Why does the government feel they have to get involved and disrupt the retirement landscape in Canada to push for Canadians in general to increase their retirement savings? What they've seen to begin with is employers shifting the risk and the financial ability of Canadians and employees to save from a defined benefit scheme that typically pays more for retirement to a defined contribution scheme that pays less. Now, even if someone has strong returns in the defined contribution plan, they can still have substantial savings. Well, the key difference between defined benefit and defined contribution plans is that defined benefits have much higher limits to the savings that they're allowed to accrue. So how does this shift look like? Well, according to the Toronto Board of Trade survey that we participated in, over 80% of plans currently are not defined benefit plans. So it's really a combination. When we talk about defined contribution plans or DC plans, there's two types, pension plans and non-pension plans. These non-pension plans are really considered capital accumulation plans in general, where you accumulate assets, monies over time. Over half of those plans are RSP programs, with the remainder distributed between for-profit sharing plans, defined contribution pension plans. Less than 20% of plans, of retirement savings programs in general, are DB plans. And this shift continues to grow over time. So the question we often get when looking at the previous chart is, well, if the shift is moving from defined benefit plans to defined contribution plans, and employees are shifting their risk and their financial culpability from defined benefit to defined contribution, lowering it, does that mean that there's less work involved or less oversight involved with defined contribution plans? And I'll show you that the answer is no. But it won't be an easy answer because the government did make it very obvious. All retirement safety programs are encapsulated within the Income Tax Act. The Income Tax Act defines what an RSP is, it tells you what a TFSA is, it tells you what a DB pension plan is and what a DC pension plan is. They define what the maximum contribution limits are when you look at your notice of assessment, when you file your taxes, the number at the bottom, your RSP limit. That's managed by the Income Tax Act. Pension plans specifically are managed, depending on the type of business you're in, whether you're federally regulated or not, by federal and provincial pension regulations. So how do you have to fund the plan? How often do you have to have an actuarial review? The payouts, who owns the surplus? How do you manage spousal splits if there's a separation? You manage under the provincial regulations and federal regulations for pension plans. You'll notice that the next pop-up sticks to pension plans. And this is a governance requirement. This is what's called the caps of governance. And the caps of governance requirements have been put together not by a legislative body, but by a supervisory body, the Canadian Association of Pension Supervisory Authorities. It doesn't have the power of law, but it's simply a minimum standard or recommendation of what rules and guidelines should employers follow to manage their pension plans. But you'll notice there's no legal framework around group RSPs, TFSAs, or DPSPs. Why is that? The government simply didn't put one in place. And so again, back to the question, if employers are moving from DB plans to DC plans, isn't there a lower level of responsibility? The answer is still no. It's very frustrating. But the reason for that is the CAP guidelines apply. There's a similar set of guidelines that's been put together for RSPs and TFSAs and so on, that spell out minimum oversight requirements, from providing members with the information that they need to make decisions, the tools, how are you reviewing your investments. What's more, over time, the trend has become such that the same level of responsibility and oversight for defined benefit plans and defined contribution plans is now being applied to RSPs, TFSAs, and DBSs. It doesn't have the power of law, but the result is that it has become an expectation both by regulatory agencies such as the Financial Services Commission of Ontario, as well as others. So let's look at an example. We talked about in a high level that there's been a trend to have the same level of oversight in defined contribution plans. Default investments are a perfect choice. What's a default investment in a defined contribution plan? When a member joins a defined contribution plan of any kind, they're required to make an investment decision. Simply, where am I going to put my money? The answer is most of the time, well, I don't know right away. Or maybe I'll decide later on, and they may leave it till a later point in time. But in the meantime, they're making contributions, the money is there. It has to sit somewhere. The default investment option, or that choice, is a temporary holding place for that money to sit in. And there's been several ways that default fund has progressed over time. It started with guaranteed income accounts, or GICs. We're all familiar with those to some extent. Banks offer them. It's a place for your money to sit, accrue interest at a very low level, but the principal, which you actually put in to begin with, is protected over time. It's not going to fluctuate with market conditions. Similarly, daily interest accounts pay even less, but protect principal, and there's money market funds. Historically, these are the main three vehicles that have been used with default funds. Money market funds are more interesting because you're actually exposed to the risks, the ups and downs of the marketplace. What's more, you're paying a fee to manage those funds. Sometimes you get a 1% return in the money market fund, but because you're paying a 50 basis point fee, you're cutting your end return in half.
Just a curiosity, does anyone know what banks are paying right now for GICs? What the rates are? I mean, if you look at some of the return, in fact, Dimitri made a good point about money market funds. In a lot of cases, you're making less than 1% after your management expense ratio and your fees. And if you remember Patrick's earlier slide, that doesn't even quite get up to CPI, headline inflation. So the danger of having products like this as your default, people's defined contributions are going into this fund, but they're actually losing buying power over time. So this is something that Dimitri's going to explain why it's evolved from this scenario to more plans looking at other options and alternatives.
So with GICs offering roughly a 1% return, not really offering a significant ability for members to save over time, in combination with best practice, what is happening in the industry, and as a response to member inertia, there was a move both in the industry and with legislative bodies to make a change to this. Because ultimately, members who end up being in a default fund, we've seen through any record keeper, whether you deal with an insurance company to hold your money, whether you're dealing with a bank, whether you're dealing with a mutual fund company like RBC, people typically, when they choose their investments and they are left to make their own decisions, leave their money where it is over a prolonged period of time. So when your money sits in a GIC and it's not accruing much interest, you're not necessarily looking out for your best self-interest when it comes to saving for retirement. So what's happened over time is that with the development of the mutual fund industry, balanced funds came to be targeted risk funds that are based on a questionnaire you answer to let you know if you're a conservative, aggressive, or moderate investor, and then it plugs you into a prepackaged option, or target date funds. And we'll talk a little more about target date funds, but these are very similar to target risk, but they look at your risk, your level of comfort with risk, and they shift you over time. So it's a really hands-off approach where you don't even have to reinvest your money going forward. You just have to set it and forget it is the popular way of speaking to target funds. But even with these options in play, now you've got 6 options on the slide here to look at that are the most popular in general historically. Default funds, how do you decide? Well, the province of Alberta and British Columbia got together and decided that for the benefit of plan members, in the absence of them really knowing comfortably what decision they should be making, we're going to legislate in BC and Alberta, that either a target date or a balance fund be the default fund used for all of our pension plans. In fact, what you'll see is that this has become the trend across Canada throughout our industry. Target date funds were introduced somewhere around 2005. It took about 5 years for everybody to analyze what a target date fund is, how they're built, and become comfortable with them. Starting in 2010 and now to 2015, just last year, you'll see that target date funds have jumped to roughly between well over 30%, closer to 50% of default funds used in the industry. This isn't necessarily new, but it's a growing trend that has in itself proliferated a lot of development in the target date space. Why is that? Well, this is a basic target date fund. If somebody wants to retire in the year 2050, they would buy themselves a 2050 target date fund. What that then will do is invest them automatically in a very risky portfolio. And as they get closer to the age 65, let's say as an example, or their targeted date of retirement, it will shift them to a more conservative asset risk. Less equities, more fixed income, maybe even some money market or GIC. It really depends on the product. But it just does that automatically. The member doesn't have to go back into their account again or look at their investments. And that was a really the vanilla approach to all target date funds. What's happened now, really, because of the proliferation of the default fund to be targeted, is that there's been an explosion of development in products. It's no longer such a simple approach to have a target date fund. In fact, there's no apples to apples comparisons. So now, in fact, employees have even more choice if presented with a suite of target date funds. Which one do I use? And ultimately, the responsibility is that of the employer to help members navigate that decision. The employer decides on what investment venues are provided to employees. And the employer decides what level of communication is provided to employees as well. Ultimately, the employer has to decide what is the purpose of their plan. Are they helping employees save for retirement? Are they helping them by hoping that this savings plan become a pillar in their retirement savings program overall? And if so, they have to cater to the employee from a communication perspective in a very comparable way. Currently, a lot of target date funds are being analyzed for the glide paths. How are they moving from 2050 to 2015? Is it just a straight down arrow? Is there allowances for changes in your lifetime to your lifestyle? Are you having a family at a certain point? Are you having kids? Are your kids living in a house? What risks are you exposed to? More importantly, how is that portfolio built over time? What equities are you investing in? What fixed income instruments? Are you investing in real estate? Are you investing in mortgages? Why does that even matter? Ultimately, it comes back to the member. And we find that across the board, there's typically 3 types of members in retirement programs. Delegators, that really choose target date funds, and that's 65% at least of plans typically have, the majority of their employees, or 65% of the employees in these target date funds. Dabblers who like to do the questionnaire, maybe go to a target risk fund, and the do-it-yourselfers. And the do-it-yourselfers like to pick and choose your own. Ultimately, again, there's a communication responsibility on the employer's behalf to get across the message about what members should be using. We need to inform the members. But how do we currently communicate? Typically, when members are providing packages, whether it's through a bank or through a company retirement program, they're bombarded with information. They're provided a giant cloud of data and wording that they simply don't understand. It's a lot of data to process. So if you want to simplify communication, what's the ideal way to do that? Ultimately, we want to accomplish 3 things. What do we want our employees and members to know? How do we want them to feel about it? And what do we want them to do as a result? And this is really the ideal thinking process behind building any communication material or project. Ultimately, how are you going to touch on these 3 items to drive through your messaging to your employees? Because right now, this is what they have to face every time they look at a retirement plan. They're faced with words like compound interest. Some understand that. Not so much those that look at things like value investing, GARP, growth at a reasonable price, what type of mutual fund you're looking at. Is it insured? Is it not insured if you're in GICs? They're just bombarded with this information, and it's very hard to cut through. Well, if this is happening in pension plans, and this is happening in our daily lives, what's the result? The result is that currently over $700 billion of unused RSP room remain on the books. People just aren't using their RSPs to the maximum. Sun Life estimates that over $3 billion of unused company match is left on the table every year, accumulated. In addition, there's an estimated $1 trillion of TFSA room left unused. This is money that is left on the table that is tax sheltered, that people just aren't using enough access to. This is not simply a industry issue. This is an issue that the government is noticing as well. And if you tie this all up a little bit more, from the beginning of the transition from DB to DC, and the onus of responsibility falling on members, and then the result is this, where members simply aren't maximizing the value of RSPs that's available to them. The government decided to go forward or BPs. Now everybody gets the privilege. So, what happened? Catherine Wing in 2013 decided that they're going to go forward with the Made in Ontario retirement solution if the federal government doesn't introduce an alternative, such as increasing CPP, which is what Catherine Wing really wanted to do. Of course, the government said no. So, the OPP was started and advanced to such a point that Compass, as well as on behalf of our clients, released communications to the government informing them of our opinion that simply a Made in Ontario solution is certainly not ideal from a funding perspective. It will be underfunded, and certainly not ideal from a timing perspective, because they wanted to rush it initially to 2017 and had to delay to 2018. It got to the point, such a crescendo, that everybody, including consultants and employers, was working and analyzing the effect OPP would have and getting this tools ready for 2018 implementation, that when along came Bill Morneau and introduced CPP increase last week, it caught everybody off guard. At that point, nobody actually expected CPP to be increased this year, let alone in time to cancel ORPP. But here we are. CPP is now being increased, and how's that happening? Well, ORPP is being ghost-busted. And the reason we say ghost-busted, one, officially ORPP is not canceled until an announcement in mid-July. That happens to be the time that the new Ghostbusters movie is coming out. Everybody's interested. And so, in addition to that, details around what the CPP increase will look like are few and far between. What do we know? We know that 8 out of 10 provinces supported the CPP increase. Why is that important? It's important as far as knowing, one, that regardless of the lack of support, CPP increases will go forward. Manitoba will likely eventually jump on board. They resisted at first because they are a new government that's only a couple of months old, so they haven't had time to come to grips with their own provincial situation. Secondly, they are not in full agreement with an increase in CPP. Quebec has their own program, QPP, and the only reason they didn't voice their support is because, as usual, Quebec wants to do it a little differently. With that said, they are going to follow through with, very likely follow through with similar increases to CPP with their QPP program. It's just that the way they're going to do that will be different. I think they have different concerns about low-income earners, and they will raise the low-income exemption. So what is CPP increase going to achieve? They're targeting increasing the 25% replacement of your income in retirement to 33%. How are you going to do that? We will be increasing the upper earnings limit from just under $55,000 today to ultimately just under $83,000. This will be starting in 2019. That limit will slowly increase year by year all the way to the year 2025, and it will continue to increase from there going forward. In addition to that, the proportion of contributions being made to CPP will also increase. Currently, both employees and employers are paying 4.95% towards CPP from their paychecks. That will go up by 1% for both employers and employees. Starting in 2019, it will slowly grade up to 1% by the year 2023. Now here's the kicker, and this is where we need to wait for more additional information. We don't know exactly what form that increase will take. If it will be a prorated approach, if it will apply to, if the 1% will be on a full $82,700, so meaning up to 5.95%, where it's 4.95 on the first, and then extra 1% on the latter, or vice versa. We simply don't know for sure. There's been guesses in the media, but simply right now they're just unconfirmed guesses until we have an official announcement. We're in a waiting game, just like we were with ORPP. So we get to do this whole process all over again. It's great. Ultimately, with these increases coming into play, the main factors to note is, even though it is a 1% increase over time, it's happening over a much, much slower period. It's starting in 2019, ultimately to 2025. We have 7 years to go through this. The 1% increase on a per individual basis is actually cheaper than the ORPP would have been. What's also important to keep in mind is this is a national solution, whereas companies that are national employers had a provincial problem. It would leave them with a patchwork solution. You have one solution in Ontario. What if you have employees in Alberta or in British Columbia? How are you going to treat them differently if ORPP was in place? Now that's no longer a point of issue because you have a CPP, which mandates a solution across the entire nation. Ultimately, if you are sensitive to costs, most companies are, how are you going to absorb the cost? Are you going to look at your retirement program and see if there's room to move there? Are you going to look at your salary, your payroll, bonus structures, your headcounts, benefit costs, or ultimately your profits? Are you going to change your outlook for the future? Are you going to change the prices you ultimately charge to customers? Our clients have looked at each and every single one of these items in preparation for ORPP, and some will continue to do so for CPP. What's interesting, as far as our own experience, is that we've already had a few clients tell us that with regards to this form of increase, because it's taking place over a much longer period of time, and it's proportionally lower cost, some of our clients will be absorbing this cost. And we've been in this position before. Back in 2004, roughly, or a little earlier, when the Ontario health premium was converted to a health tax, there was a transition of cost where previously employers shared a cost of this health premium with their employees, which was tax deductible. When it was converted to a tax, the employers took on the full burden of that cost typically, and didn't charge back employees or dock salaries, dock benefits programs. This is a very similar type of change. And we do expect, while most of our clients will continue to review their financial positioning, we do expect this to be a lot easier to swallow than ORPP was. I know this is the main topic that most people are interested in, so if you have any questions, feel free to let me know, whether you want to share it with the group or individually. There's a lot that is remaining to be covered, and simply that's by nature of the information.
And one of our colleagues, Mark Dowdell, so he heads up the investment and retirement practice at Compass. Last week he was talking about the issues around Canada Pension Plan, the ORPP, the Ontario Retirement Plan. And the way he talks about it is, it's not a pension issue through just discussions he's had with plan sponsors. It's really a total compensation issue. And I would encourage all of you to have a look at your respective benefits plans and your pension plans, your retirement plans, in more of a holistic way and in a broader context. Because I think these all feed into the original idea that we were talking about, which is what is the strategic goal for your plan? What do you really want to get out of offering this plan to your employees? And we spend a lot of time talking about the communications for employees and really helping them understand the value of the plans that you invest in for your company and certainly for your employees. So just wanted to talk to that. One of the other things too is, talk about these different plans. Yeah, Patrick mentioned the way that we connect all these dots together. And I think it does fall in line. So Canadian organizations today are definitely spending a lot of time and energy and resources in this idea of wellness. And wellness, I think, because it plays such a critical role in helping to stem things like type 2 diabetes, which is largely preventable. And you saw the numbers that Patrick shared about obesity. And the fact that this leads to not just that one chronic illness of, let's say, diabetes, but there's a lot of impact because there's other diseases that fall in line. There's other costs, infrastructures that fall in line with that as well. We talked a little bit about how chronic illnesses, because you have so many Canadians that have multiple chronic illnesses, it does play a largely significant impact, and it's growing. And so this is something that we've been working a lot with a lot of different clients in terms of how do you manage that? How do you manage, especially on the drug side, the increasing cost of drugs? This is really the culmination of the biggest changes that we're seeing in the pension environment. So Canada Pension Plan, it has been a bit of a seismic change this week. And so where do you get that additional 1%? And so Dimitri's talking a little bit about how the government is making an attempt to really ease Canadian organizations into this so that you don't have to make any drastic decisions right away, but giving it a great opportunity to phase this in, and that can come from a number of different areas. But I think it really boils down to being really thinking through and being deliberate about how you want to deal with the incoming CPP. Dimitri, you mentioned that it is going to be less costly to an organization than ORPP would, but that really refers mostly to Canadian companies with predominantly Ontario-based employees. But you'll have national employers where this will be a very substantial cost. The other thing I might mention too, so a lot of these statistics we mentioned, some of them come from, Compass publishes a report, it's in your packages, and it's called Inside the Curve. And so we include trend factors are in there as well, and a lot of different insights. So a lot of different things that we talked to today, you'll find in that package. Another one that you'll find is the reference guide. So that little tiny red book, if you guys can see it, has a spiral line bounding. Yep, so that's it right there. So that has, we call it, it's the Canadian Reference Guide to Canadian Benefits. And what we've done is, because we know it's hard, especially if you have a lot of employees in different provinces across Canada. Every province has different legislation, but they also have their different websites and different sources of information. So we do the work to summarize in one booklet for you all the different federal and provincial programs that are available to employees today. Now, as you can imagine, the rules change all the time. So this date, basically as soon as we printed it and distributed it, a lot of the information became updated over time. So different provinces have different ideas about what these programs would entail. So one of the things I would encourage you to do if you have a chance, if you want to leave your business card with me today, I'll add your email address to our newsletter. So we publish a newsletter called The Advisor, and it provides a lot of legislative updates, industry updates on a regular basis. So as they happen, we make sure you're up to date. So for example, Dimitri was talking about the Canada Pension Plan. That very night, we sent out a notice to our clients to let them know that this is happening. And to the extent that we could, we offered some insights as to what kind of impact, what this means. So there's lots of different kinds of changes that are happening on a regular basis. So I definitely encourage you to try to find the resources like this newsletter to help you stay up to date on those. The other thought I wanted to give to you is if you want a copy of this presentation, again, just leave your business card with me and I'll give you, we have flash drives. So they look like this, they're tiny little flash drives, just like this, and so I'll give you a copy of the presentation, so I'll send it a courier to your office, so you have a copy of the presentation, and we'll send you a printed hard copy of it as well. And of course, you know, we're all here for answering any questions that you might have. So we wanted to leave a little bit of time, so we've got 15 minutes before 3 o'clock to address any questions that you might have about any of the content that you've seen. So anyone have any questions? No questions at all? We covered everything off? Just by show of hands, I mean, so earlier we talked a little bit about why does your organization provide benefits? And it's sometimes it's a question that we don't even think about. You know, we're so busy managing our plan. Maybe I'll ask just by a show of hands. The three choices that were there originally were you provide plans to be competitive, and because it's what's happening in the industry, so you provide it for that. So think about whether or not that's the reason why you offer plans. And there's no right or wrong answers here. The second reason was because it's an important part of the compensation. It's a reward for employees for the work that they do. And then the third reason was, and this is more related to group benefits, because it's productive and healthy employees are productive employees, and that's really why. You want to reduce the absenteeism that Patrick had talked to, or you want to reduce the presenteeism or the claims or that kind of thing. So by show of hands, how many here offer a plan because that's what's happening in the industry? All right, good, okay, that's good. What about,
Wait, sorry, are you answering the conference size only because that's what's happening?
no. Well, there's another reason, we'll come around to that, Dimitri. How many here, just by show of hands, offer a plan because it's a reward for employees and it's really a part of the total compensation package? Okay, so that's about almost half the room. And then lastly, how many offer group benefit because you want to have healthy, productive employees that can actually stay in the office and do their jobs? Okay, and you know what, and the reality is, a lot of us, and I'd say probably our company included, how many of us is it a combination of the three? And you can put up your hand again if you want. Yeah, I think that's really where most employers will stand, is that there is a combination of the three different reasons. But I think asking yourself that question definitely helps to provide a roadmap for making strategic decisions as you move forward with your plans.
Yeah, Chris, further to that, again, some of the clients I deal with, it is multiple reasons. You know, they want, or based on the claims results or things like that, or the employee or the employer or the group's wellness. You know, they designed it to make sure to help assist people get more healthy. The other part of the conversation is, can you show me benchmarking data? Can you show me, how is my plan competitive? I want a plan above market or at market, and that's part of the conversation too. I don't want an above market plan, but I want to be competitive. I don't want to lose out on employees for this reason or that reason. So it does come into play multiple reasons from my perspective.
So on behalf of Compass, Patrick, Dimitri, Chris, we want to thank you very much for your time. Your time is very valuable and it's precious, and you all have busy lives, and I really appreciate your taking time out to hear us present. And please, by all means, leave your contact information, and we'll provide you with all these different resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a great presentation and a lot of information we received. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us for our virtual seminar. If you don't mind, you can share your email address to them. We can send you by email. Or if you have any questions, please use our
Yeah.